Hi, everyone. I'm Brooks Rayford, CEO of NC Tech, and welcome to this briefing on the release of our quarterly leadership poll. Building off some spot polling that we did in the early months of COVID, we launched in 2022 a quarterly poll that asks some consistent questions about general business sentiment, like on hiring and growth and so forth, as well as some questions that might rotate in or out based on current events or issues. The second quarterly poll for 2024 was conducted during the middle of June, and we are releasing those results today. You'll find all of this on our website at nctech.org/pulse. We polled nearly 400 people and had a 45% response rate, which is good. The respondents were members of our board of directors, our board of advisors, tech CEOs of North Carolina-based companies, and leaders of large tech hubs or sites in North Carolina of non-headquartered companies. Our sponsoring partner since the inception for these polls has been the Stearns Financial Group. Their founder, Dennis Stearns, serves on our board of advisors and joins me today to offer some of his observations and insights from the latest poll as we go through them. Welcome, Dennis.
Thank you, Brooks.
So I'll walk through the results and highlight some areas where we've seen some shifts or consistency in the responses over the recent quarters. And so Alex is going to help me with the slide movement. We'll go to the first one. The first few, as usual, are demographics. So this just gives you a flavor of the size of organization that the respondents are from. These tend to be, the skews a little bit larger than the general business community, just based on the nature of who we poll, but you can see the breakdown there. This is fairly typical. About 2/3 of our respondents' companies are located in North Carolina. That tends to be pretty consistent across the quarters. Next. Again, the roles tend to skew senior. We have C-suite dominating the response rate, and then you see some other choices there. Respondents could select more than one, but definitely leans toward leadership within their organizations. Next. Now we'll get into some of the sentiment questions. So we ask, how do you perceive the past quarter has been for North Carolina's technology sector broadly? We ask it that way because the next question asks them about their own organization, and there sometimes are differences there. For those who answered this question, you'll see that, there we go. You'll see that very few say terrible, not that many say slightly disappointing. Okay gets about 1/3. Good gets over half, and great gets a small percentage. If you look across the quarters, the response to this one has been very similar at the low end and at the high end. So always about 1% say terrible or less, and around between 4 and 6% say great in a typical survey. But what we saw this time was some movement from okay to good. So good grew nicely from the last poll, and actually is the highest it's been since the beginning of last year. And okay is also at the low end of where it's been. So the shift has happened from moving from okay to good. So that's encouraging and shows a bit of optimism popping in this poll. Dennis, I don't know what you're hearing in your general conversations, but does this square at all with what you're hearing?
It does, and there has been a paranoia, mild paranoia, in some cases more than mild, that there's a recession right over the horizon. And of course, that recession has not come and has not come. And now there's more folks thinking, okay, it's probably not going to be terrible. But, you know, from the Ninja Entrepreneurs research that we did for my new book, we still found a lot of business owners operate with a high level of paranoia, and a lot of business leaders have to do that because they're making decisions that are 1, 2, 3, 5 years out. So there's still a little bit of nervousness out there, but yes, more optimism.
Good. Okay. Next. So we see a pattern here, and when we ask this second question, first the results are right in front of you. What we see here is that from the last quarterly poll, there's been again an improvement. Good and great But actually, the main shift was to great. Great went up 6 points, and slightly disappointing dropped 7 points. So there was movement up the scale in optimism. But what often happens, and it happened in this case, good and great combined here about how someone felt their own organization's past quarter was, combined for 68% saying good or great. Only 57% said that in general, they felt like the sector had had a good or great quarter. And that we see that almost every poll, that people, maybe because of headlines or just speculation, maybe feel a little less optimistic or positive about what's going on in the sector, but their own organization, they tend to report more strongly. And Dennis, I know we talk about this almost every time because it shows up that way every time.
Yeah, exactly. And again, I think some of this has to do with all the buzz that is out there in the internet universe and the news feeds that tends to trend a little bit more negative. And so
Mhm.
everybody thinks, oh, my baby's doing okay, but maybe everybody else isn't doing quite as okay.
All right. Okay, well, now let's go forward looking. The next slide, we asked, I expect that over the next quarter, our business will, and very few again say decline. About 28% say stay the same, but 71% say grow. A slight shift from grow to stay the same in this one. So looking ahead, people are a bit more cautious. Not a dramatic shift, but from the last quarter, the grow went from 76 last time to 71 here, and stay the same went up from 22% to this 28%. Um, I will say that the 71% saying grow is still among the higher quarters of all last year plus the first two of this year. So Dennis, I guess the optimism that people feel again about their own business is maybe stronger than what they think about the sector as a whole.
Yep, exactly. And you know, we've talked before about the fact that consumers are gaining more power than ever
Mhm.
before, and that's true in the B2C space, but it's also true in the B2B space. But tech in general has got some tailwinds in terms of CapEx spending. So um, good for our association and our members.
Absolutely. Okay, next. We always ask about hiring details, and this one is fairly straightforward. Are you reducing your headcount at your organization? Are you just not hiring right now on a net basis, or are you hiring? This pattern tends to follow, has been fairly consistent, that very few in the group that we poll are reducing headcount, which is encouraging. Not hiring or staying steady is about 30%, and 67% are hiring. I will say that the hiring percentage here, it matches the highest response or the highest results over the past year and a half. In fact, it was the first quarter of last year, it was the last time it was this high. And the not hiring has remained very consistent. The reducing headcount went down. It was at 6% last time, down to 3.5% this time. Interestingly, you know, we see the monthly job reports and the related unemployment rate, the national unemployment rate hovering around 4%, which is still quite low. The unemployment rate in North Carolina is about 3.5%. The tech unemployment rate is half of that. So that's nationally. I don't know the North Carolina percentage on that one off the top of my head. But it is interesting that our sector still seems quite resilient in terms of not seeing much reducing of headcount and still actively hiring. Now, Dennis, you and I have talked before about the fact that may be somewhat unique to the tech community, but overall, nationally, the numbers still seem to be pretty strong.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, North Carolina, I think, has some nice advantages with our business climate here. Recently, I was talking to somebody who heads up the food and beverage industry for North Carolina, and our wine industry is actually booming while the national wine industry is in decline. So go figure, you know,
Figure.
NC is a good place to be.
It is. Okay, next. We ask two open-ended questions every time in this poll, one of which is what makes you optimistic about the next 12 months? And the next slide, when we get to it, we'll ask what concerns you or worries you about the next 12 months. No surprise that AI is a big one here, but also the economy and interest rates. There's a lot of people commenting they're optimistic about that. Elections and political climate, I guess depends on, I don't know which whether they're optimistic because they think one side's going to win that they happen to favor or the other. And market and business growth was a strong one. You also see job market and hiring fairly prominent here. And if you now go to the next slide, you'll see that some of those same things appear. This always happens. That's big. Election and political uncertainty. The size of these kind of reflects the frequency of mention. Inflation, interest rates, economic slowdown, again, hiring and talent acquisition. So every time we do these polls, you'll see some of the same terms or phrases show up as things people are optimistic about, and on the list things that they are concerned about. How do these compare to what you're hearing and sensing with the folks you work with, Dennis?
Well, I'm interested that the regulatory and compliance issues is not a larger font than it is, because that does seem to be among the private business community a bigger issue. The inflation one, it depends on which direction you're coming from. The recent inflation numbers we had in the last week have been actually pretty good.
Yeah.
And, there've been still some weird anomalies. Auto insurance catching up on premiums was a big part of why we even had inflation. And shelter continues to be a higher component, but it's coming down. So from the perspective of, will the Federal Reserve start lowering interest rates in the next 6 months? That's looking more positive. From the perspective of supply chain, we hear all the time that some of the supply chain folks who feel like their particular input to the supply chain is more valuable and less easy to substitute with another vendor, they continue to try to find ways to raise prices. So you can have both things happening. You can have inflation at the national level, calming down, and still have supply chain inflation.
Good point. Okay, let's move on. We blended in several questions this poll about workforce. At the beginning of this year, we announced a partnership with MetLife, one of our larger and active members. They have their global technology and operations hub based in North Carolina, actually. And so with some research they're doing on a national level and a publication we're going to be putting out either later this week or next week, we wanted to ask some of these questions around workforce. So this one is, higher education degrees are necessary for tech workers. A lot of discussion about that. What degree, lowercase degree, what degree of post-high school training and education and certifications are necessary? And so on this question of higher education degrees being necessary, strongly disagree, clocking in around 7%, somewhat disagree 25%. So a third basically disagree with that sentiment. A lot of neutrals here. I was surprised by that. And then, of course, somewhat agree and strongly agree. One thing that comes to my mind is that most of the respondents to this poll are going to be people in senior leadership and who probably have a college degree, at least a college degree. So they may have a bias toward that. But then again, I'm just speculating there. I'm going to move through these, Dennis, and then we'll talk about them because we'll be able to see some contrasts with the next slide or two. Entry-level employees don't have the right skills to succeed in tech positions. 45%, 46% disagree with that. Again, a large neutral component, which is hard to fathom, but the somewhat agree and strongly agree combined for just over a quarter of the respondents here. So there seems to be a less agreement on the statement that leads the question. Next.
Yeah, and Brooks, it just strikes me that one of the things that could be happening with this is a lot of the buzz that either now or in the near future, an AI enhanced worker with good common sense might beat out somebody with a college degree who didn't have as good a common sense. And, I hear that all the time, and I've got a number of companies that are driving towards that result. I don't know that we're there yet, but maybe that's baked into this a little bit.
That could be. That could be. Okay, next. So this one posits that school technology curricula are misaligned with practical application and or lack real world job relevance. Again, that persistent neutral chunk there of a quarter is there. Fairly small percentage disagree with that statement. And of course, you see a very significant majority think that it is the case. And there's a lot of effort underway all the time to put employers with educators to try to figure out the types of things that students need to learn, what kind of skills they need to be successful. And on that note, I'll close with this round of slides, or the next slide, Alex. And it shows that, again, respondents could pick more than one, but look at the first two. They are not technical skills. They are skills, sort of to your point, Dennis, someone who's got good common sense, who's a collaborator, who's flexible, has good critical thinking skills, and so forth. That clearly dominated our respondents' thoughts on the critical skills for success, followed by AI and more technical certifications. So based on those four slides, Dennis, any overall thoughts or insights that come to you?
Well, first of all, being an old chess master, I think it's not too late for anybody to take up chess, and that helps your critical thinking skills. But, my observation is, and I do a lot of work for major universities as well as K through 12. We do a lot of financial literacy work.
Mm-hmm.
And my observation is everybody kind of knows what we're looking at here. It's very uneven how quickly they have pivoted to be able to offer more real life experiences in critical thinking. But I think it's picking up. I think it's accelerating, and they realize that it has to. Public school K through 12 has probably had the most difficult time. They describe it as trying to turn around an aircraft carrier. But even they are generally trying to incorporate a lot of this into their curriculum. So if you're hiring somebody near term, I don't know that that's going to be helpful. But it does seem like a lot of employers are doing more work, consulting work, or having training, education that are around exactly what's on the screen here.
Mm-hmm. Well, what we convene, as you might imagine, we convene leaders in tech fairly often in small group settings and discussions, and this comes up a lot. And when they lament the unfortunate lack of some of these skills that you see at the beginning of the slide. Okay, Alex, we can go to the next. So we also asked, what tech roles are you most looking to fill this year? AI is there. It's not as high as some of the other more traditional ones, but just to give you a flavor of tech worker opportunities among our North Carolina-based employers. All right, well, that wraps up the results from this quarter. Thanks again to you, Dennis, and the Stearns Financial Group for sponsoring this polling series, and a reminder that you can find this recording on our website at nctech.org/pulse, along with the slides, as soon as we can get all of that posted. I'll also email a link to all of those who registered for this briefing to that area of our website for easy reference. So for now, thank you for viewing, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks all.